Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Khalisah Harris-Shahid, founder of the Islamic Library Association. My work focuses on equitable and accurate Muslim representation in library and educational spaces. In this series, I'm in conversation with educators, authors, and professionals whose work helps shape public understanding, educational access, and the ways communities come to know themselves and others. Today, joined by Dr. Jawairriya Abdallah-Shahid, educator, consultant, humanitarian, author, and advocate whose work spans literacy, leadership, social emotional learning, and global education. Our conversation today explores education, libraries, representation, and the shared role educators and librarians play in shaping understanding and access. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Juwaria. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam, Dr. Khalisah. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing well.
It is great and definitely a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Okay.
Your work spans classrooms, leadership, literacy, and
Mhm.
global service. What has shaped the way you think about education, not just as instruction, but as a responsibility to shape what communities come to know?
I would say that it's been several things that have shaped it, but I think what has shaped education for me the most was having children. I loved learning and school while I was growing up, but after becoming a parent, my mind really opened up to all of the possibilities um, that a well-rounded education offers. And then wanting the best for my children and my family members, it really widened my ideas and my thoughts.
After you became a parent, did you notice then how you view the roles of librarians and educators working together and shaping not only what students can access, but what they can come to understand as worth knowing?
It really did. One of the things I started working intentionally on establishing a school I wanted my child, my oldest daughter, to attend. I didn't really see programs that I felt were instructional at a young age that were really giving them more than just play. So I was one of the founders of Rainbow School Alliance for Youth Success, which was a private school upstate New York. And she was one of the first pre-K students at that school. And we focused very intentionally on social skills as well as academics, irrespective of the fact that it was preschool. And this was something that was very important. And at that young age of pre-K and kindergarten, we were avid users of the public library.
Mhm.
So all of the students that we had at that time, and it was a modest class, I think of 7 students when we first started, and they were all given the opportunity to build relationship at the library with one another, with us as educators. And then they were encouraged to go with their families on weekends. So my children spent lots of time in the library, and so it was a very natural partnership throughout my life as well as my education career.
Hmm. You mentioned how you, your students, your children, and their families spent a lot of time within public libraries.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to the Islamic Library Association, they're deeply concerned with access, representation, and what communities are taught to know. From your perspective, what role should libraries play in helping students encounter more accurate, expansive, and culturally grounded ways of learning?
I think it should be a primary goal for libraries because when I think about the late 90s, early 2000s, there were virtually no books in those libraries related to Muslims. You may find one about Ramadan. It was very old, usually tattered. And there were, at that time, even less with African American stories, right? So the need is obvious because even as children, you'd love to see books where the characters look like you. It's very important. I think it's something that has to be talked about more on various levels, not just the elementary level, but all through K-12 as well as university level. It has to be expressed because even when you get into college and in universities and you visit libraries, there is not enough representation on that level as well.
Hmm. Speaking of a representation, you are an educator as well as a children's author.
Mhm.
How do stories help shape public understanding in ways curriculum alone cannot?
Um, well, curriculum alone definitely can't do it. I say stories start with people, they start with children. Um, it's it has to be a keen focus for everyone to really bring those life experiences into a format where people with different lives, different cultures, different experiences can also learn from them. So we can't get away from the importance of books and what's in those books, what that content is, and what's driving it. I think there's going to be an ongoing concern as well as discussion topic for a long time, but I hope, the Muslim Library Association and other organizations will join in to um, make it a constant and relevant, important topic that has to be continuously addressed.
Hmm. You've written
Yes.
to
Uh,
help contribute towards having that representation and
mhm.
things like that. Can you share a little bit about your books and where people can learn more about your work?
So the books are on Amazon and it's a moral themed children's book series. So we have I've completed 7 books, thus far. And really what makes it unique is not just that it has a moral theme, but each book represents a different country. So, like the Double Dutch, story is United States, the Dumplings, China, Brazil, Heart of the Ball. And every story will have a map of that particular country. And it'll also have a game that is specific to that country and the culture relevant to children that is in that particular setting. And it was really intentional because my thought was, what if the only exposure some children have are books?
Mhm.
Everybody does not meet people from other countries, from other cultures, from other religions. So if we have books that have good content, that have, a moral theme, compassion, love, kindness, respect, that would be wonderful. So that is what inspired me to kind of do this project because I wanted to see more of that. And then also reading oftentimes is not as popular as it was maybe 20 years ago in terms of really encouraging children to spend time with books. And I noticed that in some storybooks, it's very, very simple language. And I wanted to challenge and have books where parents would also sit down and read those books and discuss it with their children, where the language isn't just simple and it's inclusive of words that they're not familiar with, that they're things they don't know. So, just on various levels of reading improvement, of exposure to cultures and continents, right? All of that went into this moral themed children's book series. And it's something that I completed under my a business Premier Education Consultants LLC is also on the merchandise page of the website Premier Education LLC. You can order the books from there. It takes you directly to the links for Amazon.
Perfect. And we will definitely share that link with everyone.
Uh-huh.
And in regards where you're talking about the inclusion of cultures and continents within the books that you've created. In many spaces, including Islamic schools, Muslim students are still navigating what is absent, what's misrepresented, or just narrowly framed about their or someone else's identities. What responsibility do educators have in shaping something more accurate and more expansive?
Well, I think definitely, since you mentioned Islamic schools, it has to start in those schools and has to start with the people that are in those schools working. As an African American educator and having been in the public and private sector, it is also a concern, even in Islamic schools. So it has to start with the way that we deal with people, the adab we use, the etiquette, the getting rid of stereotypes that have been created in Western society that aren't applicable to African Americans, that aren't applicable to African American Muslims. And then while doing that, we also need to ensure that we have representation, that there is textbooks and that there are resources within those institutions that show positive examples, and that we also pull upon the historical and Islamic examples because we have, so much with Prophet Musa alayhi salam, with Bilal radiallahu anhu, with Hajar alayhi salam, so many that represent Black Muslims that is not taught, right? It's not in the curriculum. And it's rarely discussed. And so that's something that we have to change as well.
As an African American Muslim woman in education, how have you understood the relationship between teaching, visibility, and that public perception?
Whew. Hmm. It's a quagmire of relationships. I think it still needs a lot of work. As an African American woman, as a professional, the challenge does not end. It doesn't matter if you're in the public or private sector or within an Islamic institution. I think we're battling on different fronts, and that has not changed. But I think improvements have been happening because more African American Muslim women are networking and speaking to one another about how we can address some of these challenges and some of these issues.
Mm. I definitely agree. The challenge is probably going to persist,
Hmm.
and the networking is important. And because you dedicate so much of your time and have committed yourself ultimately to this way of life of fun resources per se for children,
Uh-huh.
but still educational, why, from your perspective, is it important for librarians and educators to recognize their shared responsibility in shaping access and in strengthening Muslim representation through what they teach, collect, and make visible?
Well, I would say to start that if there's a concerted effort for librarians and educators to work together, it does pave the way for meaningful conversations and ensuring that Muslim representation is a priority and remains a priority. There definitely is a cyclical relationship where educators pour into children and then librarians expand and nurture those intellectual needs. That definitely will make an impactful difference, I believe. If a student learns about Ramadan and then can find books on the Ramadan in the library to read, borrow, and kind of support what their learning was, they become a better informed student. And then overall, they're more well-rounded as an individual and as a member of the general society.
Very much so. I do agree that librarians expand what educators are teaching the children. And
Mhm.
even in higher education, Same thing, you can learn something, but that same information can be expanded by coming to
Mhm.
a public library.
Right.
And even the university libraries, all these things should really include people, like you're saying, that are part of society,
Uh-huh.
even if it's not in your direct, immediate little circle.
Right.
It's a, especially with the internet, everything's global. So how
Right.
you were saying how you have books with children from different cultures, it's because it exists. It doesn't only have to be you specifically.
Uh-huh.
And it really sheds light on people can have shared faith, but different cultures.
Mhm.
And it's very
Yes.
important to not exclude anyone from that. That
Right.
we can't just show one type of Muslim and say, oh, yeah, we've shown the Muslims. Especially when it comes to the whole entire Black diaspora. It's
Right.
because even African Americans' culture is still different from African culture, even
Uh-huh.
though we may both be viewed as Black. you
Right.
know so there's just so many differences, not to show how we're different, but differences to appreciate and to know one another.
Right.
Not focus on those differences, but with those differences recognize the similarities. And it's a disservice to everyone when we're only showing bits and pieces of a faith group of people.
Right. I think that too, that diversity is so important because African American Muslims are not going to have the same view or foods or social acceptance of different actions the way someone from Nigeria or Ghana or Burkina Faso, the diaspora is so wide,
Hmm.
right? And when you're talking about African Americans or, Black Muslims, you have countless groups within that one group.
Hmm.
So again, that also shows the necessity and the large contribution that reading, that books, that providing information has, if it's done with everyone in mind, if it is inclusive, then the impact will be far and wide.
Definitely. Well, Dr. Jawairriya, thank you so much for joining me today and for such a thoughtful conversation. Your
You're welcome.
perspective reminds us that education is not only about teaching information, but also about shaping understanding, visibility, and
Mhm.
access for future generations. Thank you all for joining us in this conversation through the Islamic Library Association's educational interview series. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Join the Islamic Library Association, and together we can shape a more inclusive future for literature.